Commander Masters is here, and with it come 4 new pre-constructed commander decks. Now, while I think the best way to enjoy this set is to play limited, get some draft boosters, play with some friends, these decks are pretty dang cool. Today, I'm just going to be unboxing them so you can see them in their entirety, and then in the description of this video, I will have links to the actual deck list if you need to see it in written form. Kick back, relax, we're just gonna open these up.
First up, we have the Colorless deck. It's not quite an Eldrazi tribal deck, but because it's colorless and Eldrazi are the iconic colorless creatures, there are quite a few Eldrazi in here, which does lead to some spicy plays. Now, if you've never played a colorless deck, the biggest thing you need to know ahead of time is that it is pretty clunky. Games tend to go a little slower because your ramp is mostly artifacts. A lot of your spells are costing a lot more for efficiency reasons. If all of the colorless spells were really good and efficient, then, everyone would just be playing the colorless spells instead of the spells in their actual colors. And there's also just not a ton of interaction when it comes to instants and sorceries, so you can probably just rely on mana rocks and big creatures. However, that's something that didn't really surprise me, didn't really throw me off, because we have a couple colorless decks in our play group, so I've kind of gotten used to what to expect from their playstyle. Overall, I actually like this deck quite a bit. I will say the double cascade is a little awkward. That takes a little bit of getting used to. It's definitely not friendly to new players, but it does lead to really exciting, fun plays. And then also, I think the deck could benefit from having more utility lands. There is a lot of stuff in this deck that cares about basic lands, so running a handful is obviously a good thing. And getting waste reprints is good because they tend to be a little expensive, which is kind of crazy for basic lands. But because it is a colorless deck, it would have been nice to see a few more utility lands. But overall, I think this deck is really, really sweet and a lot of fun. Next up, we have the Jeskai Planeswalker deck. Now, out of the box without any upgrades, I think this is probably my least favorite of the new decks. First of all, neither of the new commander options out of this deck are that strong by themselves. They really need other things on the board to really do much of anything, and even then they tend to be a little underwhelming. Not having green or black in a Planeswalker deck is definitely cool as far as branching out and letting Planeswalker decks try new things, but you do obviously miss out on a lot of good Planeswalkers by not having access to those colors. But those are pretty minor things that I'm willing to look past. What hurts is the mana base and the actual amount of Planeswalkers in the deck. To my count, I think there's only 17 or 18 Planeswalkers in the deck, and I don't know how many Planeswalkers I would recommend running if you were going to build a Planeswalker deck, but I would assume it would want to be more than that, at least by a few more. And even then, some of the Planeswalkers in here are not good. Now, I want to give credit where credit is due. There definitely are good Planeswalkers in here, and if you are going to build a Planeswalker deck in this color combination, there's definitely like some all-star picks, but there are definitely some really bad ones in here as well. And I think more than any of the other decks, this one in particular shows off the neglect that the mana base gets in these precons. That's always been true for commander precons. They tend to not put a lot of really good lands in there because they can put those lands into other sets and charge for more money, but these are already more money than the average precon, so it stinks that in general I do think that these mana bases are better than the average precon mana base, but they are still not the best, and I think that shows off the most in this one. With that said, it is fun to have a Planeswalker commander option in this color combination. I do think the deck runs okay, but in my experience with the couple of games I've got to play with it and see it in action a couple times now, I do think that this is unfortunately probably the poorest constructed of the decks and probably the least powerful, even though it is still pretty cool. Next up, we have the Abzan Enchantments deck. This is the one that I actually think I like the most. I find it the most impressive. Obviously, enchantments are just pretty strong in general. There's a lot of enchantress effects that just let you draw a card or do something else whenever you play another enchantment, and then those tend to chain together to have really big explosive plays. And historically, what I tend to not like about enchantments decks is that doesn't necessarily lead to winning the game or ending it anytime soon. However, with this deck being so focused on enchantment creatures in specific, that obviously is helpful in actually bringing the game to a close. Like the other 3-color deck, I don't necessarily think the land base is amazing, but with the fixing and ramp that green gives you access to, I think it slides a lot more with this deck than it does in the Planeswalker deck. This is the one I am most excited to tinker around with and maybe upgrade and make some more of my own. Finally, we have the 5-color Slivers deck. I think in general, this plays just like any other 5-color sliver deck. You're playing a bunch of slivers that all are helping each other, and that makes a big, scary, aggressive board pretty quickly. And if that was the goal, I say that this deck accomplished it. I will say the Gravemother is probably not the best 5-color sliver commander. However, I think it does probably go in the 99 of pretty much any 5-color sliver deck. The reason I say that is just because the Encore effect can get kind of expensive, especially if you are casting some of the bigger and more powerful slivers. So it just tends to not be as useful as often as some of the other commander options you have, but it is a sweet card to have in the 99, even if it's not the commander. In decks like this, I feel like tend to be a little bit more on the complicated side as far as keeping track of all of the abilities. However, it's not actually that bad because your opponents tend to start picking away at your problematic pieces, or they just bring out a board wipe. Where I think the deck is probably the most lacking is just card draw, but it wouldn't take much to fix that problem. That would help you rebuild after a board wipe, or it would help you keep the action going later into the game. And I will say the only other 5-color precon that I'm aware of is the one from Dominaria United, and the mana base in this one is way better. While it is the slow fetch lands, this deck does have fetch lands, and it has fetchable dual lands, as well as more efficient ramp cards like 3 Visits, Farseek, and Nature's Lore. Unfortunately, the mana base is still pretty slow between all of those tap lands, and then the 3-color tap lands, not the triomes, but the other ones, are also in here. So while your fixing is pretty good, it is a very slow mana base for how quick the deck is trying to be. Overall, though, if you like a good aggressive deck, I think this checks pretty much all of the boxes, and there are lots of cool new additions in this deck that could also upgrade any of your already existing sliver decks.
So overall, I think these decks are pretty dang sweet, really fun, classic themes that it's fun to see get expanded a little bit more. And overall, I think the value in them is pretty good. There's a lot of pretty good reprints in here. They play pretty well outside of the box. A couple of them need basically no upgrades in order to compete with the average commander deck, and the other couple just need a little bit of upgrades here and there. If you can find these without having to pay crazy markups, I say they're worth it, especially if it's a theme that you've thought about building before, or if you even just want to maybe even touch up one of your other decks that you already have that's in one of these themes. Buying a Precon that is a similar deck and then playing the Precon a little bit just to spice it up a little bit, then taking it apart for the parts you need. That's actually pretty fun. I've done that a few times as well. Recommend giving it a try. But let me know what you think about these new Precons in the comments down below. And if you like Magic the Gathering, if you like this video, make sure you're subscribed, hit like. We have a couple other videos either just did or are about to come out, so you'll want to be seeing those as well. I will see you next time.